In the end, she still managed to struggle to her feet, her small face looking highly pale. Upon seeing that, the old man nodded his head approvingly. You held out for 2 hours today. You've shown improvement, but you must not let up. You must work even harder at it. Do you understand? The young girl's face was expressionless as she acknowledged with a soft yes. Time moved on ahead once again, and she was already 9. Tall and slender, long hair flowing down to her waist in a tightly bound-up ponytail, and her face beautiful and exquisite, a comfortably quiet and unaffected figure. Among her peers of the same age, she was always the most eye-catching one, as whether it was in terms of looks or demeanor, she was exceptionally mature and highly self-effacing. She did not have many friends, merely a scattered few, whom she was a little closer to after they became more familiar with each other, and came to know that her cold personality was not her being haughty or arrogant, and not someone who thinks that people are beneath her. She was born like that, a young girl who had been lonely all by herself for too long, and was not skilled at communicating with others. After all, she was someone the family head had kept closely right by his side, never having been treated as a child. In fact, she was put through training that was more stringent and harsh than any boy, as the future heir of the family clan. Having lost both her parents from a very young age, she would have needed to fight and struggle harder than anyone else. That was because in that large family clan, she had no one to rely on but only herself. If she did not become strong, she would be gobbled right up by this world, where only the stronger one survives. At that age, all the children in the family clan would be sent here for training, and they would then choose the most outstanding one to be selected as a candidate to become the heir to the family clan. It was completely impartial and fair, and no favoritism was shown. That was also the reason why she had to work harder than the others, as she would not be shown any special favors, just because she was the one and only descendant of the family head. On the contrary, if she did not try her hardest, she would be bullied and crushed by the voracious branch families. Because she was just a pitiful worm, an orphan with no parents to shield and protect her. That's just how people's mentality works, bullying the weak and fearful of the strong. It could be because a person had been bullied and humiliated before, and they start to hold a grudge. But when the same thing happens to them, they will not hesitate to trample on others. Oh, the unspeakable sorrows of the weak. One fine day, a child who looked to be older than all the others arrived at that place. That child seemed like he was already 15 or 16 years old, a tall and thin-figured youth who was handsome and good-looking, his eyes 2 small arcs and very smiley. He was quickly well-liked, especially the girls, who immediately swarmed all around him excitedly, their faces blushing red and pink. Except for that young girl clad in her black training robes, she did not seem to really care. She was very beautiful, quiet, and distant. From the moment since he appeared, she had merely glanced briefly his way once, not paying him all that much attention, treating him like he was invisible. It was not until the old man showed up, which immediately dispersed the bunch of children, all of them scattering like frightened rabbits before the young girl finally showed a change in her expression, as she called out to the old man in a soft voice. "Grandfather." The old man nodded, and then turned his gaze onto the youth. "You're here." "Yes, family head." The youth lowered his head slightly to say, except for children who are his direct line descendants, everyone else had to address the old man as family head. This was a rule in the family clan set for generations, even though the other children were also his grandchildren, but just a little more distant in blood. A branch family is still a branch family after all, and they cannot come to compare with his direct line descendants. But this youth here was an exception. He was a child from the branch family, but it seemed like a dark horse had appeared from a branch family this time. This youth was extremely gifted in cultivation, more outstanding than his eldest son back when he was at this age. Maybe, with proper grooming, he might come to achieve even greater heights, and would be able to assist the next generation's family head greatly. As long as he was forever unwaveringly loyal. The old man's gaze deepened slightly as he opened his mouth to say, "From today onwards, you will train together with these children. You are exceptionally gifted, and I hope that you can lead all of them to improve together with you." The youth smiled warmly, and then replied respectfully, I will heed the family head's orders and do everything I can. When the group of children heard that the good-looking elder brother will be training together with them from now onwards, they were all extremely delighted. Right. This is my granddaughter Qingyu. I have kept her right by my side all this time as her parents departed from this world early. Take good care of her for me from here on. The old man then said to the youth. The youth was stunned for a moment before he lowered his eyes down to look at the young girl, who only reached just above his hip. She seemed so cold and indifferent. Even after what the old man said, she did not show much in the way of emotion, but just raised her eyes up to look at him. The youth curved up the ends of his lips and smiled before crouching down to reach her eye level. His eyes looked like they had stars twinkling in them, warm and enchanting. Is your name Qingyu? What a nice name. Can I just call you Qing from now on? My name is Qing Tianlin, and from today onwards, I am your elder brother, so I will protect you. His eyes were filled with smiles as he looked at the young girl, the look on his face serious and somber. Qingyu was flustered for a moment. Elder brother? Does that make him a kin that she could let her guard down towards, to trust and rely on without worry? That person's smiley disposition seemed to cast a warm sun into her cold, lonely soul, catching the young girl off guard. Unexpectedly, she was not repulsed by it. The love her strict grandfather showed her was always accompanied with endless blood and tears. Although he was her closest blood kin, the young and puerile little girl could not help but feel sad and dejected around him. And the man's appearance had undoubtedly quickly made up for the longing for affection from kin that she had envisioned. It was always so easy to start to rely on a person, and to like them. She started to let down her wariness and her heart's defenses that she had put up for so many years, and came to truly see this man as her real elder brother, to treat him as an important and treasured kin. Till the day she turned 16, the day she was to undergo her coming-of-age ceremony. From being just a clean, good-looking youth, that person had grown to become a man. No matter in terms of looks or the way he carried himself, he had changed dramatically. It was probably because they had been close for such a long time, and were too familiar with each other, that she did not notice it at all. Even the youth that she had brought back was seemingly trying to hint to her about it. She might very well have noticed something before, but she was still unwilling to admit it, not wanting to face up to it. Till one fine day, where the man told her that he had a surprise for her. He had said, from them onwards, she would not have to suffer so much anymore, as he would help her shoulder everything. She had been mystified at that time, not understanding the meaning behind those words, when she then found herself slumping limply onto the table before her, unable to summon up the slightest bit of strength at all. The man in front of her with his handsome and genteel face, then gently carried her up before putting her down on the bed. It was only at that moment that she finally came to realize something, as she fought to keep her increasingly blurry sight open, and her heart filled up with pure and utter disbelief. He laughed softly and said, Do not be afraid. From today onwards, Qing will come to belong to me. We will be together forever, as we walk on the path towards great power. A light soft kiss then fell on her forehead, earnest and sincere. But even though she was unable to move her body at all, unable to gather up any strength at that moment, she was still able to feel the immense surge of unease rising up inside. She had never ever thought that the relationship between the two of them would become like that. A person that she had seen as an elder brother for so many years was now doing things that someone with that identity should never do to her. In that instant, she felt as if she had fallen right into a glacial pit. Her body turned icy cold, losing all temperature. However, his voice still came to sound in her ears. I do not think that you're aware that I found you so exceptionally unforgettable right from the moment I first saw you. And when those cold and different eyes finally came to be filled with trust and affection towards me, it was truly the most beautiful sight throughout the whole entire world to me. At that moment, Qing was so movingly beautiful it just made me want to possess you so much, just like now. Upon saying that, he lowered his body, and was going to kiss the young lady on her soft luscious lips. Unexpectedly, even though she was unable to resist and unable to move, she still barely managed to turn her head to the side, just when his lips were just about to press down on her, resulting in the man coming to kiss her cheek. He was surprised and was just about to make his move again when he heard the young lady's slightly hoarse voice sound out slowly and haltingly. "Can you not do this to me?" The hoarse-sounding voice even carried a slight sobbing tinge. "Do not shatter the last sliver of hope I still hold in my heart. Do not make me become disgusted with you." He had said that he would be his closest kin, to forever shield and protect her like an elder brother. The young lady then closed her eyes sadly, and a single tear fell from the corner of her eyes, crystalline clear under the silvery moonlight, beautiful and alluring. "Why are you crying?" Seemingly greatly pained, he stretched a hand out to wipe the tear away. "Don't you like Big Brother very much? Big Brother dotes on you so much, why do you not like me?" As his voice fell, he did not wait for her to respond, but went on to run his long slender fingers down over the young lady's smooth cheek, moving them slowly towards her robe collar that was in slight disarray. A small section of her well-defined collarbone came exposed, together with that soft smooth neck, her skin so fair it seemed to glow with a faint pinkish tinge. Such a tender and nubile young lady, and unimaginably perfect. Even her hair was giving out a faint alluring fragrance, pulling him in seductively like an irresistible love potion. His heart was inextricably attracted to her. She closed her eyes in despair, her body unable to summon up any strength, but the fingers on her unmoving hands were tightly clenched up, the veins on the back of her palm bulging up visibly. It was so painful. So very painful. Why? Had it all been her own wishful thinking all this time? The man's gentle countenance was filled with exhilaration, like the mask he wore for so many years had finally been torn off, and his real face had come revealed. She screamed out silently inside. Is that what hell feels like? If it is, then just let her die at this moment from this tormenting agony she was feeling inside. Chapter 331. 3. Soul returns, you beast. Suddenly, a barely subdued rage-filled roar sounded by her ears. She felt the weight pressing down on her body lift away, and a piece of clothing that was filled with a kind of chilly air was immediately wrapped around her. "There's no need to be afraid. It's all right now." The youth's clear voice that carried an icy tinge sounded in her ears, and it felt like the voice of an angel. When she came to open her eyes, all that she saw was the always quiet and handsome-looking youth, silently protecting her by her side, and the expression on his face at that moment was seemingly showing a rare moment of worry and anxiety. She did not say anything as she looked at him, so he did not dare open his mouth as well, afraid that he would scare her, that frail and frightened little thing. It was not known how long had passed before a change came over her gaze, and she said softly to him, "Little Yi, thank you. Thank you for pulling me right out from hell." Time moved again, and the scene changed. Because of her stubborn refusal to give in, she was made to watch her kin and people who were close to her die one by one as time went by, coercing her to agree to his evil intentions. Clad in a pristine white ceremonial dress, it was the day she turned 20. As the devil was waiting eagerly for her arrival, she chose to end her unbearably painful life. That was because she discovered that even up to that point, she was still unable to steel her heart to have him dealt with permanently. How sad and laughable is that? The kinship that she treasured so much was all just a fake and hypocritical act to him, never affecting him much in any way. And what she was most sorry about, the person she felt she had really let down, would be the grandfather who had carefully groomed her from a very young age, hoping to see her take over the family clan from him. He had told her that she must not cry, as only the weak shed tears, and she must not be moved by affairs of the heart, as that would impede her steps in her way forward. And now, not only has she allowed herself to be impeded, she has also cried in pitiful weakness before. Grandfather must be very disappointed in her. But she was really tired. So wearily tired. Even though her life had spanned just a measly 20 short years, she felt as if she had already plowed through more than a better half of her life. Throughout her life, she had never felt so weak and helpless like now. This time, she really felt like being a weakling for once, to escape from everything. "Qingyu, you've grown up so much." An old and wizened voice that was so familiar to her seemed to reach her from far over the horizon. But Why do you still dwell so much in memories of the past, unable to be free? Real strength does not singularly come only from a person's level of powers, but it's also the ability to let things go, to forget the painful past. You've only paid attention to all the unbearable things that have happened on the surface, but failed to notice that it had been constantly pushing you to grow all this time as well. Have you realized that? Chapter 331. 4. Soul returns. That last statement from the old and wizened-sounding voice carried a sliver of strength and power, striking her deep in her soul, as if she had returned back to the time when she was being sternly admonished. Grandfather. The sleeping young lady suddenly parted her lips to talk in her sleep, her long eyelashes becoming slightly moistened as the look on her face became sad and pitiful looking, which pained a person's heart to see. She moved. Sitting by the bed, the enchanting-looking man in red clothes immediately widened his eyes in surprise when he saw that, and he quickly rushed outside to say in a raised voice, "Junyao, come in and see." The little lass just spoke. That flustered man who was in such an excited hurry was none other than Bai Jiyan, who had not been seen for so long. From the time that Lu Junyao came back from that place, it had already been a fortnight in the blink of an eye. Qingyu was carried back here by Lu Junyao because she had fallen into a deep coma back then. Her entire body turned a fiery red, the burning temperature refusing to recede, while her pulse was faint and erratic, disappearing completely at times, which was just terrifying to see. Bai Jiyan and his father had been relentlessly busy for a good number of days straight, working to treat the young lady before her body temperature finally came back down. But the young lady had not once opened her eyes, like she would never wake up from her sleep anymore. Lu Junyao had not shut his eyes all this time, throughout the whole 2 weeks, till he suddenly fainted last night, and was sent back to his room to rest. It was only after the man fainted that Bai Jiyan checked the man's condition, and came to discover that the man's body seemed to have been burnt everywhere, where there was almost no healthy bit of flesh left on him. And because the man had left that alone for too long, his clothes had stuck to his burn wounds in many places, where the slightest tug on his skin would tear and reopen the wound, causing him to bleed. It was just too ghastly to see. Bai Jiyan really did not know how the fellow was able to withstand it for so many days, not saying a single word about it, but to just keep watch over the little lass like he had lost his very soul. Lu Junyao's room was not far away from here, and he had already regained consciousness. When he heard Bai Jiyan's loud exclamation, he appeared there in almost the very same instant. But the pallor on his face still looked a little pale, his violet eyes seemingly a little grim. Having not spoken for a good number of days, his voice came out a little hoarse. "What did you just say?" Bai Jiyan's lips quivered a moment before he replied. The little lass showed some response just now, and she even opened her mouth to say something, but I did not hear her clearly, and do not know what she said. Hearing that, Lu Junyao's gaze swiveled onto the figure lying on the bed with her eyes closed. She was not showing any signs of regaining consciousness, and the aura around his body seemed to grow heavier. "It's true. She really spoke just now. Why would I want to lie to you?" Bai Jiyan quickly explained in a hurry when he saw the suspicious look on Lu Junyao's face. "Qingyu, wake up already. Everything's over, and the life you chose for yourself is just beginning, isn't it?" Finally, it seemed like the old man's stern and kindly face flashed very briefly and smiled at him. It was for just an instant before it disappeared before his eyes. On the bed, Qingyu's body jerked once before then slowly opened her eyes. Chapter 332. 1. Finale Part 1. Feeling highly indignant, Bai Jiyan was suddenly taken aback by surprise as he watched the young lady slowly open her eyes. He immediately stretched a hand out to point excitedly, thinking that he would finally be vindicated. See, she's come awake. I told you I was telling the truth." Hearing that, Lu Junyao turned his head to look. The young lady's eyes narrowed sharply for a moment, the expression on her face looking a little blank and puzzled, like she had lost her soul. His heart constricted as he stretched his hand out to hold hers, and her hand felt a little cold, just like it always had. "Little fox," he called out softly, like he was afraid he might startle her. The young lady's large limpid eyes blinked a few times as she slowly regained her senses, her gaze slowly turning onto the worried countenance of the man right before her, gradually coming fully awake. So, it was all just a dream. It had all seemed so real, and she had thought that everything was happening once again. All of it had been real. But her gaze froze, suddenly remembering something. She seemed to have heard grandfather's voice just now. Had that been real, or was it just a dream? The little lass couldn't have lost her memories, could she? Seeing the lost and bewildered look on Qing Yu's face, and not showing any other response for a while, Bai Ziyan's face immediately became serious as he went over anxiously to ask her, "Do you know who I am?" That scene felt rather familiar. Back in the constellation lands in the past, when her spirit soul had come out from her body, and she had just woken up after being unconscious for a few days. This man had also come up to her to ask whether she remembers him, which felt rather comical to see. Qing Yu stared at the man, not saying a word. Seeing that, Bai Ziyan became more flustered, his good-looking face creasing up. "Looks like you really can't remember me. I will have to go look through the elixir formulas and see what could be wrong here." "You're being too noisy." The young lady suddenly spoke up, interrupting his incessant and endless chatter. Bai Ziyan was taken aback a moment, before he then started to say, I do not have amnesia." Qing Yu opened her mouth to clear his doubts. "Then why were you unconscious for so long? Are you feeling unwell somewhere?" Bai Ziyan then asked with furrowed brows. Qing Yu looked surprised, and then turned to the man beside her. "Was I unconscious for very long?" "Almost 20 days. Lu Junyao replied in a deep voice. "Did I sleep for such a long time?" Qing Yu mumbled softly, as she raised a hand up to cover her eyes. It was not known what was going through her mind, but one was able to feel that the air around the young lady's body had suddenly become rather depressed. Chapter 332. 2. Finale Part 1. His eyes fixed on the young lady, Lu Junyao's gaze grew deep as he looked at her worriedly. "What's wrong? Are you still feeling uncomfortable somewhere?" His unfinished words were stopped right behind his lips, because the young lady suddenly stretched out an arm to hook it around his neck, and nestled her head deep into his shoulder to say in a soft voice, "I am fine. I just feel that I'm so fortunate to be able to wake up again." Those words sounded like she had just made a hard choice between life and death, and had just struggled free from a horrendous nightmare. And that could not be any further from the truth. Only heaven knows just how real that long and frightening dream had been. And every time it resurfaced in her mind, it felt so repressive she would find it hard to breathe. When Bai Ziyan saw what was happening between the two of them, he wisely retreated his own way out of there. There were only the two of them in that room at that moment, and it was so quiet they could hear each other's breathing clearly. The young lady did not say anything for a long while, but just stood there to embrace the man tightly, not relaxing her hold on him in the slightest. Although Lu Junyao did not know what she experienced in her dreams, but to be able to cause such a resilient and strong-willed young lady to exhibit such weakness and unease here, he could very well roughly guess what it was about. "Hush, it's all right now. I'm here with you." Lu Junyao slipped his arm around the young lady's waist and patted her back reassuringly with his other hand, comforting her with a soft and tender voice. "That person will not appear before you again. He is dead. Have you forgotten that?" Hearing that, Qing Yu was slightly taken aback. "Is Qing Tianlin dead?" That's right. She could still vividly remember that person screaming himself hoarse just before he died. She also remembers that assassin with his handsome countenance, whose hands were stained with the blood of so many countless people, but possessed such a pure and pristine spirit soul. He had said, "Do not forget me." He has died. In order to save her, he had leapt into the portal with Qing Tianlin. Thinking about that, Qing Yu's heart winced painfully, and her face became a little pale. Why did that person's death feel so unforgettable? They had only met a few times in passing, and were not exactly all that close or familiar with each other. At that moment, it seemed as if Lu Junyao's mind was linked to hers as he slowly opened his mouth to say, "Some time ago, I happened to hear Aunt Lan mention something about a person named Shi Zhanchen. She said that many years ago, before you were born and was still in your mother's tummy, your affinity with him was already set. When you were born, you were ill and sickly, almost unable to survive. As blood from the snake tribe had miraculous properties, you were fed with his blood, which then allowed you to live. From then on, all manner of pests and rodents did not affect you, and remained perfectly healthy, seldom falling ill. Chapter 332. 3. Finale Part 1. Speaking up to that point, Lu Junyao paused for a moment to look at her before continuing. Aunt Lan said that the man's condition for saving you back then was to have you stay by his side forever, but it was not known why he chose to let you leave in the end. When Lu Junyao finished with those words, a cascade of images flashed through Qing Yu's mind for an instant. They were all of Shi Zhanchen's stoic, unsmiling face, and it was only when he saw her that the face would break into a sliver of a smile. He looked the same as he always had in all those images, but she was just a tiny little toddler who had barely just learned to speak. Why? Why are you staring at me? Her childish puerile voice sounding miffed, her tiny mouth puffed up in an indignant pout. The man was taken aback for a moment before he laughed out loud. He then said, "Because I like you, so I want to keep looking at you, as I am afraid that I'll not have a chance to see you anymore in future." Qing Yu's eyes widened in surprise. Is she imagining things here? All of this clearly felt like they were her own memories, and not memories that originally belonged to this flesh shell. But when did all this happen? She had found the man so familiar the first time she met him because she had known him all along. Could that man really possess such amazing abilities, to be able to predict his very own demise at the very end from such a long time ago? "Ayao!" She called out softly, her voice carefully wary. Lu Junyao's heart winced, feeling a shot of pain. He responded in a deep voice. "I'm right here. People are always dying because of me, and I'm really afraid of such things happening. But there is nothing I can do to stop it. Is it all really my fault? If not for me, they might all still be living happily in some corner of this world right now." Her voice was a soft murmur, seemingly in self-detest. Lu Junyao embraced her more tightly. "It is not your fault at all. The fault lies with those people whose hearts were blinded by their own selfish desires. As for those people who died, there is meaning behind their deaths, and there is value in the things that they've done. Maybe they did not truly die, but have just moved on to a higher realm of existence." "Is that really true?" Qing Yu lowered her eyes, her long lashes hiding her emotions in her eyes. "So has grandfather gone to that place as well? Gone to a place that did not allow them to see each other anymore? My dear Qing heir, you've finally woken up." The warm and gentle voice of a woman suddenly sounded outside the door, a little choked up from having just pulled through treacherous calamity. Qing Yu was startled before she slowly raised her head up from the man's shoulder. Clad in all red clothes, Qing Lanfei was as stylish as ever. Even though she still looked a little wan and weak having just recovered, her countenance was just as attractive and enchanting as always. Mo Jingyu in full white stood right beside her, his handsome facial features perfect and flawless. The two of them still looked as compatible as before, even though they were now parents to their two children, the passage of time not leaving the slightest trace on their faces, both as good-looking as ever. Qing Yu looked at the woman whose eyes were slightly reddened at the corners, and she lifted the corners of her lips slightly as she opened her mouth to say, "Has mother recovered fully already? What can happen to me? I was already feeling much better once I got out of that god-forsaken place, and with your timely treatment, I've never felt better." Qing Lanfei smiled as she lifted a finger to wipe at the corner of her eye, and then held the young lady's hands, as she said in a soft, tender voice, "You were unconscious for so many days, and it gave all of us such a big scare. Especially Jun Heir, who did not even shut his eyes at all, and that child has not fully recovered from his wounds. Are you all right?" Before Qing Lanfei could finish, the shade on Qing Yu's face immediately changed, becoming highly anxious as she looked at the man sitting by the bed. She suddenly recalled that he had held her very tightly back, then, even though the searing heat on her body would burn him, and he had not loosened his hold on her in the slightest. Lu Junyao shook his head with a smile. I'm all right. It will heal very quickly now that you've woken up. Let me see. Qingyu knitted her brows up deeply, not believing his words. She stretched her hand out to grab his arm, and was just about to pull back his sleeve to check his wounds, when something on her hand suddenly struck the man's finger, which let out a clear, crisp clink. Qingyu was surprised for a moment as her gaze instinctively lowered to look down at her own hand. Her fair and slender hand, her skin soft and flawlessly smooth, looking like fine exquisite jade. Besides that fact that she was an elixir cultivator, and that she had always looked after her hands with great care, her body constitution also played a part in her flawless skin. She did not really like wearing accessories, and her hands had always been bare. But at that moment, she saw that there was a crystal-clear red ruby ring on her ring finger. Upon a closer look, it seemed as if blood was swirling inside the stone, a beautiful and exquisite piece. Qingyu was a little dazed. She remembered that the ring had been tossed away by Lian Shi when she was taken away from the divine temple. She had thought that she would never see it again, never thinking that it would be found and worn on her finger. It was found in the divine temple's lotus pond, and I've carried it on me ever since. Lu Junyao held her hand as he said in a soft voice. Qingyu beamed at him. Luckily you managed to find it. Having carried it on my body for so long, it was a little hard to get used to it after it was lost. Qingyu, he suddenly called out to her in a stern and serious tone. He had always called her little fox all the time, but has suddenly called her by her name. She could not help feeling rather surprised. You told me before that giving a man a ring means wanting to bind and tie down that man. I have been tied down and bound to you. Lu Junyao then touched the point of his finger on the ring upon his ring finger. His deep mesmerizing violet eyes then turned to gaze deeply at her. So, when do you intend to give me an official status? When do you intend to give me an official status? Qingyu stood stunned in her spot, like she had not expected that the man would ever speak those words. What does he mean by that? Do you remember what you promised me? Lu Junyao curled up a corner of his lips as he looked at the young lady standing there, dazed and bewildered. His voice carried a slight hoarse tinge as he went on to say, after we rescue Aunt Lan, we'll get her to officiate our wedding, to make you completely mine. The man's words seemed heavily laden with meaning, alluring and seductive, tugging at the young lady's heart. Qingyu blinked her eyes innocently before arching up an eyebrow as she asked, have I said that before? Acting dumb here are we? Lu Junyao narrowed his eyes and said before laughing out softly. He then leaned in close to her ear and whispered something, which caused the young lady to freeze in place with an embarrassed expression on her face before turning beetroot red, which made her look all the more alluringly beautiful. What a thug! Saying things like he has seen every bit of her, so she can only marry him and no one else. In order to not let her be disadvantaged, he'll let her see his every day and future. How incorrigibly shameless. Seeing the two of them like that, Qing Lanfei could not help but laugh. She then turned to the embarrassed-looking Qingyu and said, June Air is a child that your mother here watched grow up, and I can attest to his good character. If the two of you are together, I do not have to worry that you will be bullied in future. Having seen how anxious and antsy that fella had been when little Qing Air was unconscious, refusing to take a single step away from her the entire time, that just showed how much he cared for her little Qing Air. See, even Aunt Lan is speaking up for me. Are you still going to reject me? Lu Junyao raised an eyebrow to look at her, seemingly complaining that she was being incredibly callous and cold-hearted. Qingyu remained silent for a moment to look at Mo Jingyu, who had not said a single word so far, and then started to say softly, but my father hasn't agreed to it, right? If he does not agree to it, you must have done something that made him dislike you somehow, and I will not go against my father's wishes. The young lady's words caused everyone to be stunned by surprise, but the most shocked one of all was Mo Jingyu. Never had he ever thought that Qingyu would actually care so much about his opinion. They had just been reunited not that long ago, and their relationship had not yet become all that close, but it seemed like the young lady really respected him as her father from the bottom of her heart. He was not that blind to be unable to see that the lass clearly loved that little devil, Lu Junyao. and she was concerned about what he thought. His own daughter had already made it so clear to him. How could he possibly continue to stop her? Moreover, besides the fella's temperament that did not exactly sit well with him, there was nothing much else about Lu Junyao that he could pick on. Regardless whether it was in terms of looks, status or identity, he came second to none. So young yet so capable. Mo Jingyu let out a long sigh. Let it be. It felt like in the blink of an eye. Fei Er and his children are now all grown up. Thinking back to the past, when the two of them were together, and went through so much hardship and tribulations. And now, their daughter is already old enough to be with her beloved, which really should be a blessing, isn't it? Foolish lass, as long as your choice is right, no matter how reluctant I am, I will respect your decision. Mo Jingyu stretched a hand out to caress the young lady's cheek, and said in a warm, tender voice, Thank you. Qingyu's eyes arced up, a delighted twinkle seeming to shine in her bright phoenix-like eyes. In this life, she has parents who love her so much, and it feels really great. Qingluan Fei and Mo Jingyu spoke with Qingyu for just a little while more, and they probably wanted to give her and Lu Junyao some time alone, so they did not tarry long. Having lain in bed for such a long period, Qingyu's entire body was feeling a little stiff and numb, so she struggled a little to get out of bed, wanting to walk around for a bit, to loosen up her sore muscles. Stubborn as she was, Lu Junyao had no choice but to give in. The scenery in the Divine Healers sect was breathtaking, and the season was just entering into summer with many unknown species of flowers starting to bloom, the air carrying just a slight warm tinge. As Qingyu ambled slowly along, her footsteps suddenly came to a halt. Lu Junyao was walking just behind her, and he came to a stop in his tracks as well. What's wrong? Qingyu was silent for a moment before she started to ask in a soft voice. After that day, where did little Yi go? Lu Junyao's eyes darkened slightly as he opened his mouth to reply. He said that he is going to a place where he should be. Did he say anything else? Lu Junyao's brows knitted up, seemingly unwilling to talk about that. But he still told Qingyu what she wanted to know. He said that he will not bid you goodbye, because he will not be able to say it when he sees you. He also said. The man's voice suddenly halted. Qingyu raised her eyes to look at the man. What did he say? Lu Junyao's eyes became tinged with an indecipherable emotion. He said that you lied to him. Parting, no matter when or where, can never mean any good. And ever since meeting you, it has always been parting after parting, never able to be together. Even though he had always known that she did not feel that way towards him, he had always continued to long and yearn for her attention, even if it was just the slightest bit, where she would just cast her glance at him for a single instant. He would have no regrets. Chapter 333. 3. Finale Part 2. And he knew deep down inside that even though it was only such a small and minuscule bit of hope, it would never ever happen, as they were people from two very different worlds. Even though it was so close, and it could even be said to be within hand's reach, the gap between them was like an insurmountable chasm, where they could only forever remain being the closest strangers. That kind of a feeling was just too painful to bear. It was really just too unbearable, and he could not endure it anymore. So, he thought that if there was a far and unbridgeable distance between them where they would not ever come to meet, he would no longer feel so intolerably tormented. Otherwise, he was worried that he might really be unable to suppress that caged beast in his heart one day. Lu Junyao left the latter words unsaid, as he believed that Qingyu would have understood, and she must have guessed that the man would make this choice in the end. After hearing what Lu Junyao said, Qingyu did not speak for a good while. After a while, her voice then sounded softly. I have always felt I owe little Yi so much. In both our past and present lives, he had always lived for my sake. He had clearly grown strong and powerful enough himself, but always made himself look small and insignificant before me. Sigh. She let out a self-mocking laugh as she lowered her eyes. What did I do to be worthy of that, but have merely picked him up out the snow? He had then treated me like I was his everything, where he lives when I live, and will foolishly follow right behind me if I die. He could have lived a much better life. Affection for another person is not something that one can control as they wish. Maybe he found it a blessing and happiness that he was able to protect you silently from the back. Lu Junyao embraced the young lady from behind, his voice low and deep as he said softly beside her ear. Is that so? Qingyu raised her head up slightly to look at the man. If it was you in his shoes, will you do the same thing and protect me silently like that as well? Lu Junyao curved up the ends of his lips. Of course not. Qingyu immediately arched up an eyebrow, incomprehension filling her eyes. Once I've set my eyes on a person, I will naturally do everything within my capability to make her mine through any means. I will never do something like being an unknown silent protector of the damsel, and secretly watch her giggle and laugh in another man's arms while hidden. I would rather die a quick death and be done with that. Lu Junyao scoffed in a cold, disdainful voice. Hearing those thuggish words from the man, Qingyu could not help but laugh softly. You're really quite frightening, aren't you? I think if I did not choose to be with you, I really wonder what kind of a cruel torment I will have to suffer. His voice had just trailed off when she felt a warmth spread through her ear. Her earlobe held between the man's warm lips as he bit on it. Neither hard nor gentle, but she felt a numbing tingle that caused her to shrink back instinctively. What did you bite me for? How could I ever bear to do that to you when I dote and cherish you so much? Lu Junyao said with a smile as he leaned in to kiss her on her cheek. Upon hearing that, the ends of Qingyu's lips curved up subconsciously into a warm, tender smile. Fate is really something so often mystifying. When we first met, you hated me so much that you wanted nothing more than to have me killed. And here we are together with each other in the end. If I had known that you were such a beautiful young lady, I wouldn't have made any moves to strike at you at all. Not to mention that it was all over just a bunch of herbs. Even if you had come to steal my entire person, I wouldn't have resisted in the slightest. Lu Junyao pressed his face against her cheek and said with a teasing expression, Luckily I did not hurt you back then, or my heart would have broken into pieces. You and your flippant tongue. Qingyu glared at him in mock anger. I had not thought that you were so concerned with a person's looks. So if I was a little less attractive looking, you would probably not even remember my face at all. Lu Junyao was tickled by the young lady's miffed and indignant face, her beautiful eyes sparkling with life, the light deep inside alluring and seductive. Lu Junyao could not help but to lean that flawlessly handsome-looking face slowly and very close to hers, so close that it seemed his lips would touch her the moment she spoke. A slow burn flushed through Qingyu's face, and she was just about to back away when the back of her head was held in the man's firm hand, not letting her escape. What are you doing? She turned her eyes away uneasily. You might not believe me if I say it. Lu Junyao laughed softly, and then looked straight into her eyes as he said, After that time, I found myself thinking of you frequently. I thought that I must have been possessed, to actually find myself unable to get the little brat whom I have never met before, and had stolen from me out of my head. Though I gave an order that you are to be found, I had no intention of harming you, but I just wanted to see you again. Speaking up to that point, the look on his face then became devilishly alluring. Thinking back about it, my impression of you cross-dressed as a boy was already deeply etched in my mind. It must all have been predestined. The corners of Qingyu's lips lifted. What he said was not wrong. It seemed like many things that have happened was like that, already predetermined by destiny. She suddenly thought of something, and she then asked, Where did little Belle go? Why have I not seen him? That kid has always been highly concerned about her. It has been some time since she woke up, and he shouldn't be absent. Hearing her question, Lu Junyao laughed mockingly and said, I fear that kid does not have time for you anymore. A few nights ago, he grabbed that dark phantasm cat and took it with him for a bath. In the end, that cat suddenly transformed into a young woman in the pool. What? Qingyu's eyes widened in shock. You mean, Meatball turned into a human person? And a ravishingly svelte, willowy young woman at that. Qingbei must have fallen head over heels under her charms. Would he even remember you at this time? See, only I am true to you. Lu Junyao said, trying to sow dissent, but he still did not forget to heap praise on himself. But Qing Yu could not be bothered with the man at that moment, as her eyes shone excitedly. Bring me to them now. I have not seen that little fur ball in her human form before. Lu Junyao stood there watching as the young lady suddenly disappeared in a blink, the expression on his face taken aback with surprise a moment, before he went on to let out a helpless sigh. That little lass still has not answered him. He has gotten everything all prepared. He was just waiting for her to regain consciousness, and they were to be wed. Never mind. She won't be able to run away from him anyway. There's no need to rush. The corners of his lips arced up slightly, and he went on to catch up with the young lady. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support. And don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.